Hey, this is Jim Spohrer, and thank you, Ryan, for joining, and thank you, Luciano, for joining. And this is a call we're recording because we're going to pick your brain, Luciano, about the Apache Foundation. And thanks for making yourself available on short notice. I know you're at ApacheCon in your hotel room and just heading back here to California, so appreciate you squeezing this in since we, I think you know the contacts, but let me just provide it. Oh, there's someone else joining. Oh, VJ's joining. Thanks.
Hey, didn't mean to interrupt. Please continue.
No worries. We're just getting the recording started, and I was setting the context. I told Luciano we'd be picking his brain about the Apache Foundation. So the purpose of this call is the ONNX community has established a working group to move ONNX into a foundation. I'm co-chair along with Ryan Loney from Intel, who's on. Ryan, did you want to introduce yourself more or just say hello?
Yeah, I'll just say hello. I'm Ryan. I'm a product manager in the AI software group at Intel, and we're excited about ONNX having a foundation and looking forward to hearing more about Apache since we've heard about Eclipse and LFAI, and sounds like you're an Apache expert, so looking forward to hearing. Thanks.
That's great. Hi. And Vijay, do you want to introduce yourself since you're on the call, just so?
Sure, yeah. My name is Vijay Bomredipalli. I lead a group within IBM called the Center for Open Source Data and AI Technologies, or CODAI, as the acronym stands. It was previously called the Spark Technology Center, and we've expanded beyond Spark to deep learning, basically the end-to-end AI lifecycle, so from ML data prep all the way to serialization formats and things like that. So that's our interest in ONNX.
Yeah, and you also, because Spark is part of the Apache Foundation, have quite a bit of experience with having projects in the Apache.
We're absolutely aware of Apache. Yeah, so Apache is and Luciano is a great team member to have for that.
Okay, great. So yeah, our focus is going to be on the Apache Foundation for this call. We did have a similar call with Eclipse and Linux Foundation AI, just so you know as well. And so, Luciano, this call is being recorded, and ONNX community members will be listening to it. So if you could introduce yourself, and I do have, I think I'm sharing my screen. And you can see a few questions we have here. Brief history and mission of the Apache Foundation, its ability to onboard, into a vendor-neutral home, ONNX IP and assets, and the ability for the Apache Foundation to kind of let the ONNX community self-govern itself and run. Those are the kinds of things the community is most interested in hearing about. So over to you, Luciano.
Great, thank you. So my name is Luciano Resende. I work with CODAI team as well, and I have been doing different projects at Apache for about over 10 years already. I've been doing projects from start, just projects as contributors, projects from failures and everything. So I know a little bit of different areas. So let me, Jim, did you stop sharing your?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I think
okay.
You might want to share.
No, I don't. I'll just try to go over some of the topics that you shared.
I can share my screen again so you can see the list. Sorry, I didn't need to take that prop away. I just thought you were going to share.
So I'll try to go over some of the items here, and I think feel free to interrupt and ask questions so that we go further on any topic if needed. But a brief history of Apache. So basically, Apache is a nonprofit foundation for creating software free to use, open source software. We are basically at this point commemorating it at ApacheCon. We had a big party kind of like celebrating the 20th year of Apache. During this 20th year, we started as one project, and I think we have tons of projects today, a lot that are very famous and known, some not necessarily, but all like the idea behind is building communities around the projects. We have what we say at Apache is something called like the Apache way, which we value a lot more like community over code, so that if you are working on a specific project and maybe like it's a collaboration between different vendors, if one vendor strategically probably lose a little bit of like interest on that, the community behind it can still take that project, move forward, and continue with that. In terms of like a vendor neutral location, I think the thing that we see at Apache is that like although we know that companies are paying engineers to work on projects, or companies are sponsoring some projects, or the foundation in general, we take each individual as kind of like individual contributor, kind of like volunteering themselves to work on a specific project. So the way we view each contribution is they are using their contributor hat, we call it, instead of like bringing their thinking as them as part of like Intel or IBM or the organization that are actually employing them. And I think that gives a much more vendor neutral aspect to the community. And we also value the contributions that are coming from actual individuals the same way, from one individual to the other, without any specific influence based on who employed those contributors.
And Luciano, I'll just mention that David Aronchick from Microsoft just joined. And David, I don't know if you want to say hello. We're going through the Apache Foundation now.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, it's just Dave Aronchick from Microsoft.
Hey, David. Couple of other things to mention. So like why people comes to Apache and kind of like why we are to a certain extent successful. I think a couple of things. Initial thing I think is the Apache license. Is a very permissive license that has been vetted and has great enterprise acceptance and adoption. So software that are Apache licensed, they can be used, it can be renamed, it can be, you have a lot of like flexibility on what you can do with that, and enterprises have come to like that. We have a very meritocratic governance model. So the governance model is very kind of like well understood and accepted by enterprises. Individuals are actually recognized based on their contributions. And we kind of like have a very concrete set of like levels that you can reach, and usually specific ways to get to from one level to the other. So individual contributors are folks that just kind of like come, maybe collaborate with the project. Then we have committers. Committers are kind of like identified by the existing community members, the PMC members. They vote, they nominate and vote on a given committer, and then those committers kind of like start having access to directly write to the repository. The next level is what we call like PMC members, project management community members. Those are kind of like a level up into the committers, and they start kind of like having more responsibilities around the direction of the project. So they kind of like the folks that take the projects, validate, for example, things like branding of the project that they are doing, and they are responsible also for the voting on releases, voting on new committers. Then the next level is kind of like a foundation member. A foundation member is kind of like an Apache level type of like membership. And similarly, those are nominated and voted. The vote is broad in terms of like is the whole foundation that has to accept. And we have what they call kind of like a member meetings that happen, I think, once or twice a year. And during that time, we vote for new members, and we also have a vote for the board. And kind of like the board is kind of like provide oversight on kind of like the whole Apache project, the whole kind of like different projects that are happening. And if there are issues with specific projects, that needs to be escalated, we don't have what we call like any PDFL or anything like that. We escalate to the board, and usually we'll try to get consensus on the direction to take or corrections that need to be done. And I think the last thing around like why Apache, I think the branding, I think it's a very recognized branding when you talk about Apache, when you talk about Apache projects, and the acceptance that when you're talking about a need to start using an Apache project, I think those are very helpful in terms of like a project. I have some information here, not necessarily the most up to date, but I think in terms of like the foundation, we have about 6,190 commuters, over 700 active members, more than 180 active projects, 53 active podlings. Podlings are projects that are coming through incubator. And as I mentioned podlings, let me talk about incubator. So when projects come into Apache, they come through what we call the Apache incubator. And the idea there is kind of like the entry point for all projects. And it's mostly to make sure that there is an adjustment period for kind of like learning and following the Apache way. So the kind of like community over code and things like that, learning a little bit about the processes for doing releases, but also to have the ability to do kind of like any legal vetting that we need to do in terms of like code granting and things like that. So yeah, kind of basically the two main goals: ensure that all donations are in accordance with the ASF legal standards, and develop the community that kind of like adhere to Apache guiding principles. The incubator provides some oversight. Usually you'll have kind of like mentors that helps you follow the Apache way and look into kind of like policies around releases. Usually it's at least 3 members, depending on the project. 3 mentors. Depending on the project, you can have more. We provide kind of like there is a legal PMC, and those are responsible to ensure the donation part, but also like any legal related questions, license related questions that we might have. If it hasn't been answered before, they will help us get the right answer in that regards. The incubator PMC also kind of like guides around community, some of the things that we have learned in the past that helps build communities around projects. And there is also kind of like a regular checkpoint to just make sure that the projects are going the right direction. We basically do a quarterly report kind of thing, just kind of like stating the current status of the project. Let me see what else is on Jim's list. So I think talking about the ability to in process for the ONNX community to continue the self-govern. I think as I was mentioning, the PMC, which is created from the project. So when you enter incubator, you'll have an initial set of folks that are the initial committers. Those are also the initial kind of like PMC members. When you go out of graduation, then you have a list of all those folks that initially enter with the project, with the additions that you had. You have the ability to kind of like clean up folks that maybe haven't participated or have gone emeritus. But then those are the ones that actually kind of like continue self-governing the project. So there isn't much of like any external influence in that sense from any different projects or the board. It's mostly if there are issues or problems, serious problems with the project, that the board will interfere there.
Mm-hmm.
let me see if I missed anything here. I think that gives a very high level. Do you guys want me to go into more details on any of the topics or drill down on any of the specific questions here, or do you guys have any other questions around that?
Let's ask Ryan or David if they have any questions.
No, this is a great overview. Thank you.
Yeah, I think this is great.
Yeah. Are there any? Yeah, go ahead.
I was just mentioning, I mean, I think you guys have learned from the others. Any comparisons or any things that you guys maybe saw how it would work on a different foundation that maybe I can try to do a comparison on how it would work at Apache?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the things, we have, how does this align with the ONNX community's core values? The core values are things around speed, transparency, and openness. And so, for example, at the Eclipse Foundation, they said it would probably take about 2 months to onboard ONNX, and they said that's basically assuming that you have all the lawyers, collaborating and happy. It takes about 2 months. The Linux Foundation AI, they said they could do it a little bit faster because ONNX has already presented there, and several of the people on our working group have, Uber from Horovoid has already gone through, so we have people who know that process a little bit better. So they thought it would be a little faster. How long does it take to get a project into Apache Incubator, Luciano, in general?
So usually things happen in Apache in multiples of 72 hours. We usually say we leave something open for at least 72 hours. So the process here would be we start a discussion. So we create a proposal.
Mm-hmm.
The proposal can be, once it's ready, we present to Apache and say, okay, we are trying to bring Apache, ONNX to Apache. Here's the proposal. We leave that open for discussions for at least 72 hours. Once that 72 hours is gone and there isn't any major hiccups there, which usually, if you are aligned with mentors and stuff, there isn't, we move to an actual formal vote, which is 72 hours again. And once the vote is closed and you have the at least 3+1s, it means that the project becomes an official, it's ready to get into polling. From that one, the infrastructure kind of start moving things in terms of infrastructure. A lot is already self-service. So someone that has the proper access, that is a member or a VP of another project, can kind of just come and create those things. I have access. So it's as long as the new committers provide their ICLA, which is kind of a requirement to create the account, we can create the account for those. The mailing lists and everything else, it's very kind of maybe one or a couple days to get those up and running. So it will take probably, I think, making a little bit of the math there, 2 weeks. We can, if everything goes smoothly. If we have hiccups or questions or anything that needs to be answered, mostly just the discussion part. So it might go a little bit over that.
Okay, very good. And any costs associated with this?
There isn't any costs, directly costs. I mean, I know some of the folks, I think they are already sponsors, but there is no
Microsoft is on the steering committee. Facebook is on the steering committee. Amazon, Intel, and NVIDIA. Those are the 5 members of the current steering committee. I don't know if they're all member sponsors of Apache or not.
That's very easy to look up. But what I wanted to make sure is there is Apache is not kind of like a pay for play. Mm-hmm. So there is not a requirement What we have been seeing, and it's kind of like a good thing that started happening a few years ago, is that some projects might have specific requirements. They might need a specific infrastructure that maybe is not available or is not to the requirements that the project need, and then we can have targeted sponsorship. So what I've seen in the past is, let's say, OpenWhisk needed a specific hardware for their build infrastructure set up in a specific way, and they didn't want to have any kind of like other folks sharing that for performance reasons. They were able to choose, okay, we're gonna donate the machines, Apache will maintain for them, and that becomes their build infrastructure. So unless you start going to that direction, there is no initial associated costs, but it also like the foundation needs to get kind of like maintained, and we welcome kind of like sponsors and other things.
Right. Very good. So it sounds good. I don't think I have any other questions. I'm just trying to think of other things that came up with the Eclipse call or the Linux Foundation AI call. It sounds like the speed is there. It sounds like the transparency is there. The openness is there. It sounds like Apache, you know, if a community is governing itself well, doesn't interfere only when things get escalated up to the board, would that potentially happen? So I think I've got everything I need. When it comes time for transfer of assets, and I believe the steering committee is working on trying to figure out how to get the ONNX runtime integrated into the same GitHub that the ONNX code is in. Ryan or David, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but assuming that the Microsoft and Facebook are current owners, I think, of most of the assets, do you know how that process of transferring the assets works?
Yeah. So there is a SGA, I think it's software grant something. So it's a document that who owns the IP will have to sign and submit to Apache. Mm-hmm. That kind of like transfer things. If there are trademarks and other things, those usually are transferable as well. There isn't a specific requirement that you need to do that at the first day. So the idea is you get into incubation. The period of incubation gives you a little bit of like a gap time to handle all of those processes. Then in terms of like code, the code doesn't necessarily need to be all like in one repository. There are different ways of doing the repository transfer. You can actually just transfer to Apache, or we can kind of like do a mirror of the code. So depending on the approach that people want to take, it can go different ways, but that usually is something that can be done quickly, can be even done by, let's say, one of the employees of who have the IP rights, so that the employee has the ability to just kind of like grab the code and push the code to an empty repository that we created at the Apache Foundation.
Got it. Okay, great. I think that's all the questions I have. Thank you for going through the list. I think we've covered everything in this introductory exploratory call. Let me just see if anyone else on the call has anything.
Thank you, Luciano.
Nothing for me.
Right, I think we're good to go. Thank you so much again, Luciano. I'll stop the recording now. Stop the recording, and we'll end up posting it at the in the ONNX community. So thanks again, Luciano. We'll circle back with any next steps or questions we have. Really appreciate your time.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.